Hello and welcome to Channel 51 News. I am in New York, well, at least in my memories from the era of 1997 when I went there, when Rudy Giuliani had that town as good as you could possibly get it. And ever since then, it seems to have been in some sort of decline post 2001. I went there again in 2004 and then again in 2012 to the greatest city in the world. And each time there was a decline, and I don't know what it's going to be like in 2025. Josh Bernstein, welcome back to Channel 51. Good to see you.
Great to be back on the program with you, buddy.
Well, I'll tell you what, we have now got socialism arriving in the home of capitalism. What's going to happen now?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't even call it socialism. I would call it what it is, Islamofascism, or just straight out communism, because that's what it is. This is a candidate that has been pushed by the Democratic Socialists of America, which are really the Democratic Communist Party USA for all intents and purposes. And he's dangerous. Let's face it, he's very, very dangerous. Now, President Trump and this administration, there's a lot that they can do. They can defund the city, of course. They could send ICE into the city and clear out all the criminals like they've done in other cities. That would certainly help things as well. But look, he's going to try to do a lot of these different things. The problem is this. He doesn't have this. The city's broke. It doesn't have a budget surplus. It's in a deficit. It's in a very big deficit. As a matter of fact, I think it's third, California being number one, Illinois being number two, and New York being number three, as far as deficit run cities in America. Gee, what a surprise. Democrats are running cities, right? And so, he has a big game that he's talking about, all these things and that he wants to do, but I don't believe he's going to be able to accomplish anywhere near what he's hoping to do. That's number one. But number two, he shouldn't even be in the country, let alone be elected as the mayor in New York City. And I'm hoping that Marco Rubio, a Cuban legal immigrant who came here legally to the United States of America and is now our great Secretary of State, is going to seriously look into denaturalization. Denaturalization is basically taking someone that may have lied on their immigration forms on how they became a green card holder, and you get denaturalized. And another way you can do it is if you do not have America's best interests at heart, and or if you are associated with or funded by any terrorist organization. Now, we already know that CARE has admitted just yesterday that they supported him. Linda Sarsour is one of the people that literally said that they funded his campaign. CARE is a terrorist organization designated as such in 2014 by the United Arab Emirates. So that's one terrorist organization. We know that he's likely close to Hamas, if not his entire campaign apparatus are close to Hamas and Hezbollah. There's been sympathy for terrorist organizations. And all President Trump has to do, this is all he has to do, and the Mondani problem goes away immediately. All he has to do is designate the Democratic Socialists of America, just like he did with Antifa, as a terrorist organization. If he does that, now you open up all these different government tools. They can look into financing. They can look into funding. They can look into international connections with, again, terrorist organizations. And if they, DSA, are designated as a terrorist organization, there's no question that Mondani has tons of ties to the DSA. They funded him. They helped him get elected to the New York City Council and the New York Assembly. They helped him with his campaign. Many DSA members are members of his actual cabinet or his forming cabinet. So the key to it all, and I'm going to continue to stress this every single day. Yes, the DSA can be dangerous. Yes, I could be receiving death threats, whatever. I don't care. I love my country. And so if President Trump can sign an executive order designating DSA as a terrorist organization, Mondani and anyone like him are completely gone because they'll be denaturalized, which is, again, you can be denaturalized if you're associated with a terrorist organization, and you could be deported. So in other words, he could be taken from office. Now, Congressman Andy Ogles from Tennessee has already introduced legislation looking at denaturalization for him as well. Not to mention the Young Republicans Club in New York are also pushing for it as well. So I'm not the only voice out there. I'm certainly the loudest public voice out there. I don't believe there's anyone else in the media on our side that has been bold and brave enough to come out forcefully and publicly calling for the DSA to be a terrorist organization. But I will continue to do it because they are a terrorist organization, and that is the key to destroying Mandana.
Well, there's going to be a few, and this story is going to just get better and better in terms of how it compiles, in terms of the actions of what Mamdani is going to be up to, the reactions, of course, from other states, I would assume, from the point of view of realising if New York's in a bit of a hole, one of the great things would be the ability for other states to attract new people to come to their states. That's going to be something else that we're going to start hearing about soon. I've got a couple of clips I'm going to play for you shortly. In the meantime, I just want to play this one from Stephen Scalise. Just have a look at this.
New York, when they realize how bad socialism is, they can just leave like they've been doing for years. They can move to states like Florida, to Texas. They can even come to Louisiana. But if they ruin America, if they're able to take hold with socialism in America, where else are people going to go? There is no plan B to this great United States of America, and we're not going to let socialism take over in this great country.
How about that?
I like it, but I don't want people from New York going to Florida, which is now a solidly red state. I don't want people from New York going to Louisiana, which is still a red state. I don't want people from New York going to Texas, which is still a red state. You follow my drift here. I don't want these people migrating, because if these people voted for this and now all of a sudden they're suffering from it, and then they want to take their blueness and bring it into a red state and make it purple or blue, I'm out on that. Okay. So I don't want that. I want these people to stay in New York and suffer and feel the pain and anguish and despair that their lives will then be subjected to, so that they change upstairs and they fight back in their own state. Don't come running scared with your tail between your legs, escaping socialism by going to another state. I'm not interested in that at all.
Well, here's Mamdani himself. He needs a bit of money.
Good morning, New York City. Thank you. Last night we made history, and today we begin the work of making a new administration. Welcome to the transition. This is the period over the next few months where we build a city hall that delivers on the promises of our campaign, to make New York City affordable and to make government accountable to the people it serves. As we prepare to govern, we'll start announcing the leaders who will help implement our agenda. People like deputy mayors who oversee entire areas of government, and the commissioners who carry out the critical work of city agencies. These appointments will be driven by excellence, integrity, and a hunger to solve old problems with new solutions. Talking to organizers on the front lines of the fight to improve our city, government veterans with proven track records, policy experts from around the country and the world, and working people who know better than anyone what our neighborhoods deserve. And this will be a period, like the campaign we ran and the city hall to come, defined by transparency. Because New Yorkers deserve a government they can trust. On January 1st, I will be your mayor. New Year's Day and a new era for this city. Oh, and one more thing. Remember how I told you a few months ago to stop sending us money? You can start again. This transition requires staff, research, and an infrastructure that can meet this moment. And it will be made possible by the people who built and believe in this movement. So I hope you'll make a donation at transition2025.com. Now let's get to work.
Surprise, surprise.
Old problems with new ideas. So let's think about it. Let's break that down. He said, we're going to solve old problems with new ideas. What new ideas? Communism, socialism, authoritarianism, totalitarianism, Islamofascism, any type of ism? That's how you're going to solve these problems? No, you're not going to solve these problems. You know what solves problems? Free enterprise, capitalism, lower taxes, lower spending, less welfare, more people working, okay? Not rent-controlled apartments and price-controlled grocery stores and dangerous cities and streets and neighborhoods because you want to put social workers with pads and pencils rather than police officers with guns. It's absolutely insane. This person is a cancer. I will say that publicly. He is a cancer. And if he's allowed to metastasize into this city, what does cancer do? It spreads and then it takes over. And he needs to be stopped. And as I said, I don't believe anything he's saying. Again, he needs this, which is what I said in the very beginning. And more importantly, DSA, terrorist organization, Mandami's gone. It's really that simple. So I'm going to be pushing and pushing and pushing. And anyone that's watching this, I want you to send this to President Trump in America and to anyone in his cabinet and say, hey, listen to this guy, Josh Bernstein. He knows what he's talking about. Designate the Democrat Socialists of America a terrorist organization so that you can take down Mandani, the entire organization of DSA, and get rid of it completely and put it to the ash heap of history as another failed communist organization.
I'm going to play a clip now, Josh, that goes to the UK, and there'll be people, lefties, who are now watching my show. There's a particular news show I did on August 29th that seems to have captured the attention of the far left, who are attacking, of all things, a clip I played from RFK Jr., where he discussed that it was antidepressants and other forms of medication given out like lollies to many people as a reason why they became shooters. And of course, the left's saying it's the guns, it's not the medications, and they're bashing RFK. And so we've got a new audience, at least there, that are coming through. So if you're watching this one from that one, I'm going to play a clip now that you're going to call Islamophobia, but really what it is just stating the facts. And the real question is, why does the Islamic population want to take over the West? But let's take a look at this first.
The mayor of London is a Muslim. The mayor of Birmingham is a Muslim. The mayor of Oxford is a Muslim. The mayor of Tower Hamlets is a Muslim. The mayor of Newham is a Muslim. The mayor of Sheffield is a Muslim. The mayor of Rochdale is a Muslim. All of this was achieved by only 4 million Muslims out of the 68 million people in United Kingdom. Today, in England, there are over 2,000 mosques. There are over 100 Sharia courts in England, and there are more than 50 Sharia councils. 70% of Muslim women do not work and receive state support and free accommodation. 63% of Muslims do not work and receive state support and free housing. Every school in the UK is required to teach about Islam. The #1 most common baby name in England is Mohammed. This is not immigration, this is invasion. Islam is the UK's second largest religions. Most British Muslims are young and under 19. Muslims constitute 15% of Greater London's population, totaling 1.3 million people.
How about that?
Everything that was said in that is 100% true. And let this be a warning to the Islamic world. You ain't going to do that in the United States of America, okay? That ain't going to happen. We've got 430 million people. 430 million guns in the hands of 122 million Americans, of which 42% of households have more than one firearm. We will not be invaded, okay? Ever. So let that be a warning, not a threat, a warning from us here in America.
Well, this popped up a little while ago that Charlie Kirk had posted previously. Mamdani is a Muslim socialist. If he wins, you'll see what we have been warning about. It's right there, isn't it?
Yep. Not just Charlie. A lot of people have understood this. But why is the UK the way it is? Liberalism, Democrat socialism, basically appeasement, Islamist apologists. That's right. That's what they're called. And so therefore, they invite these people in. You've got the EU, which should be disbanded. I've said that for years because the EU controls the borders of so many different countries. And the EU is for open borders and globalism, right? So even if a country wants to secure their borders, if they're part of the EU, they can't. They lose their sovereignty. So I would advise many countries to get the hell out of the EU so that you can control your own borders. But the reality is that you invite these people in from these Muslim countries. They don't assimilate. They set up no-go zones. They cause havoc. They feed, and I'll use that word, feed off of your generosity. They take your resources, they take your welfare, they don't work, then they demand that you accept them instead of the other way around. And then they force their radical Islamic jihadist ideology on the people. Okay? That's what happens. And what happens from that point? Well, you see it. They appease them. They're afraid of them. They make laws for them. They teach, their ideology in the schools. They hand them out their welfare. That's what happens. And again, it's not going to happen in the United States. Mamdani is not a macrocosm. He's a microcosm. Okay, he's not the rule. He's an exception. He's a minute exception. And we in the United States of America will be making damn sure that there won't be any more Mamdanis. We can assure you of that.
You know, some of what you put together there reminds me of this youth crime problem we have in Australia, in Victoria, in Queensland, and now in New South Wales. And as someone who's now been a victim of said youth crime, you have generational unemployment. You have entitlement to believe that you don't need to work. You take from others by any means necessary, and you then play victim, and you don't get punished for any of your indiscretions. If anything, you get appeased, you get a label, and you get told that you are somewhat disadvantaged from the rest of society purely through your own lack of effort and willingness to take part in society. So in other words, it's basic definitional antisocial behaviour if you were anyone else. If you were a middle-aged white man, for example, you would be, if you had that same behaviour, you'd be punished for it and be told that there's something wrong with you, which is in a form itself another form of racism. That whole racism talk that we get into, it just shows you how far down the track we really are. But if everyone gets a label and if everyone gets to be a victim, and a system now that now, of course, the lefties, the screamers with the loudest voices, they don't want any billionaires, Josh, no billionaires, except for this guy. Oh, he's all right. We can certainly have Soros, and we can have Soros' son. And then, of course, there's that photograph of Mamdani and Alex Soros running around. Like, of course, they don't know the difference between them.
The spawn of Satan, as I like to call him.
Literally, in that remark, and for all the people out there that are attacking Israel and are showing anti-Semitic behaviour, how come they never mention this guy?
Yeah, exactly.
How come they never mention? How come they never mention the Rothschilds?
Yeah, the Nick Fuenteses of the world. These are not conservatives. These are radical, extremists that are anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, anti-Jew. And I guess you can throw Tucker Carlson now in that, along with Crazy Candace, okay? Do not represent America first. They do not represent conservatism, especially this Fuentes guy. Okay, this guy is an absolute sicko. And so we're seeing a lot of that, sadly, because what has happened is that the left has been able to promulgate this lie that you can just blame Israel and blame the Jews for all the world's problems. And even some, like Mark Dice, recently have been blaming Israel for all of these issues and all of these problems. Now, the people that would say anything otherwise, they would say, oh, well, Israel's the only country that you can't, discriminate against or you can't complain against. That's not true at all. The reality is that no one's replacing anybody. These morons, and I'll say it, I don't care, I'm pissed off. These idiots, and I'll keep my language because it's your show, these idiots on the right, that's right, I said that, the idiots on the right, on the far, far right, these groypers and whatever, these morons, all they do is blame the Jews. And they say Jews won't replace us. What the hell are you even talking about? There's 15 million Jews in the entire world. 6.5 million of them live in the United States of America. 6.5 million of them live in the country of Israel. And the other, whatever it is, 1 million or so, 800,000 are sprinkled through another 180 countries. What are we replacing? We're not replacing anything. There's barely any of us left. But you know what? Some of us that are left, that are purebreds like myself and others, we're going to continue to fight. And we're going to fight against people in our own party that we call the outsiders. These are the groypers. These are the anti-Semitic scum. that try to permeate and take over our party and get everybody else thinking that somehow Israel and the Jews are the problem. No, Israel and Jews are never the problem. It's the Palestinians, the invented people, that are the problem. It's these liberal, idiot, fascist morons on our college campuses that have been brainwashed that are the problem. It's the prostitutes in our media that are the problem. And yes, it's the Islamo-fascists that are the problem, not the Jews.
Josh,
You're not
I'm just
hate mail. I guarantee you I'm going to be getting some.
I tell you what, I'm just loading up some pictures here as you're speaking. I'm just going to bring them up on screen. I thought these were interesting too from the Mamdani era. Democrats discover innovative strategy of promising free stuff to stupid people, courtesy of the Babylon Bee. I thought that was always a bit of fun. Then, of course, you've got good old Mamdani here with the unindicted 1993 World Trade Center bombing co-conspirator and terrorist apologist. That's, of course, who you want to be mixing with. Here he is again, and I'm just trying to load up one more for you, which is the picture of Alex Soros there and Mamdani. I did see that photograph, and now I can't see it, but anyway. And of course, the other one I'm going to show you now is good old Bernie Sanders. I thought this was spot on.
Yeah, the biggest grifter of them all, the guy with 4 homes who probably got 3 of them from getting, taken over by Hillary Clinton, Cankles McPantsuit, as I like to call her. They stole the nomination from him, not once, but twice. And this idiot, this self-hating Jew, let's call him what he is, right? Atheist, self-hating Jew, scumbag from Vermont, moves to Brooklyn, New York. And then, from Brooklyn, New York into Vermont is what I meant to say. And he has basically turned the state of Vermont in the United States into a communist s-hole because of him alone. He's the one that started all of it when he was mayor of Burlington many, many years ago. And so he's infected the body politic of our U.S. Senate. He calls himself an independent. He's not an independent. He's a communist. He's a communist, self-hating Jew. That's what he is. And for him to support Mamdani, I mean, it's literally like, chickens supporting KFC and Colonel Sanders. Like there's literally no difference.
Literally, yeah. Good, well said. And this is the ultimate: is Alex Soros, the billionaire son, the spawn of Satan, there with the Mamdani himself. But you just wonder what's really going on. And of course, his father, George Soros, who is a self-admitted capo, about the lowest you can possibly get in any part of the world. Just disgusting.
Yeah. A guy that literally pretended not to be Jewish, so that Georgie Schwartz, right? That's what his real name is, and literally not only spied on Jews and told Nazis where the Jews were hiding, but let's not forget also removed Jews' jewelry and even their Jewish teeth and crowns from their mouths. Okay, that's who that guy is. Okay, he can't die quick enough. As far as I'm concerned.
You know what's interesting about this is that in that interview he claims he was like 14 and then uses the excuse that he didn't know better, but at the same time he says I wouldn't change anything.
Exactly.
So,
that's how you know he knew.
And that's how you know he knew. And I wonder if this is going to be the argument that we might be able to use in the future when we put forward to change the laws. If you commit an adult crime, you do adult time. In a time also where we're talking about castle law here in Australia that's just been rejected by the Queensland government because they think that because there's some reductions in youth crime up there, they don't need to go that far. But at what point are you meant to have your home invaded? Like it's a form of socialism or within crime itself. I'll give you an example. My car was recently stolen. We had a break-in at the home. We've identified the perpetrators because they happen to share on public social media the spoils of their crime. They're literally standing on my car holding a machete with the number plate exposed and the keyring dangling from one of the crook's hands, which is the keyring, the key that they saw when they stole when they broke into the home. Now, if they get charged, I don't have to pay the deductible or the excess, but if they don't get charged, I do. So there's a significant difference there in getting the car replaced. If I don't have insurance, of course, I just lost it. That's another thing altogether as well. Now, they can sell the car. They can enjoy the spoils of selling the car, at least to a wrecker or someone who's going to get cents on the dollar for it, but they get the money. And so in many ways, the victim here has no support unless they're privately protected monetarily. But there's no support whatsoever when this happens over and over and over again. And we read about it and we're desensitized to it because it always happens to someone else. No one cares. There was a story this week of an elderly woman who found 2 or 3 youths in her home threatening to attack her, like at 3 o'clock in the morning around the bedroom, sneaking into the bed, trying to steal something again. The woman wakes up. And this is continual. And this concept that these children, which they are, because they're 14, 15, 16, are children, they don't know what they're doing, is an absolute nonsense. You don't do 7 years of primary school, 6 years of high school, and 2 years of preschool to not know what you're doing. And at the same time, the people who support this concept, even in Australia now, there's a push for lowering the voting age to 16. Now, hang on a second. You can't vote at 16. Oh, because you're an apprentice and you pay tax. Well, there's no apprentices at 16 anymore. You've pretty much all got to go to 18 before they've got to finish year 12. But you can't have that working both ways for you if you pretend that you know what you're doing. And now, of course, you have no culpability if you go and commit crimes. And what's worse is, of course, is that this is entirely organised because it's the adults who are recruiting them to use them to do the dirty work because they are crime-free. Now, I'll blow you away now. This is in an interview I did with Fiona Barnett, who was a victim of satanic ritual abuse. She sent me a photograph once, and she said, I was 16 in this photo. She said, I was hired as an assassin. An assassin. And the reason I know that is in the photo I was wearing a watch that I bought after I had done the job that I did. Now, this is a person who was under MK Ultra mind control. So if it ever was to be brought anywhere or even investigated, I don't know how they would go in that, but just be considered a claim. Then if she's under mind control, then there's no culpability whatsoever. But these other kids, they're not under a mind control as such. They're just programmed to follow the generational criminal hierarchy of what's really going on there. So it's just extraordinary to think that that we pretend in so many ways and we appease. And we have magistrates in their, literally in their robes, sitting in their ivory towers, feeling like they're granting people gifts, like they're literally playing God now. They find the people that are committing the crimes, they convince themselves that they're weak and they don't know what they're doing, and they allow it to flourish. And when does this stop? At what point do you say, well, you know what, this isn't how you build a society, on the contrary? And so I'm reminded of, Middle Eastern states, Singapore, for example, if a person commits a crime and they do it again, they double the penalty and they double it again. And in other states, we've seen in the Middle East, you can be stoned, you can have your hands cut off, you can have all sorts of things happen to you. But they don't have a crime level. Even in China, which
Exactly.
we can talk about so many bad things about China, but they don't have the same thing. You can walk out in the street in the middle of the night and you're not worried. Of course, there's 5,000 cameras. So there's on every corner. So there's a balance and a middle ground. But we are testing the balance here of realising that what we really are is organised anarchy. If you go over the speed limit by 10 or 20 kilometres an hour, Josh, in this country, and you're a kid, you're on a P-plater, you'll lose your licence for 3 months. And if you're an apprentice, you'll lose your job. That's just how it works. But if you steal the car and go 100 kilometres over the speed limit, which these thieves have done, and sell it, you just get, oh, well, yeah, bad luck, off you go. So, look, the system is 100% broken, and anyone pretending that it's not is just not yet a victim of the system, and that's really all it is. You just have to become a victim to realise what's going on. So maybe that's where it's going to go here, is that more and more people will get to that point. But, of course, every political system knows that they look in percentages and numbers and stats, etc., and they see the growth and they know the direction and the trajectory, but they know that it might not get to that point, and then they get to the next election and they promise a few things and they move on. The wheels on the bus go round and round, but nothing ever gets sold. So that's my little rant for the day.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm sorry to hear that happened to you. That's horrible.
Thanks.
I do hope that some type of restitution will come your way and that these criminals will be prosecuted. Although from what you're saying, it doesn't sound like that is the case, because you've got these weak suck judges and, let's face it, pathetic police in Australia and elsewhere that are going to look the other way. And that is horrible. But hopefully in your case, that doesn't happen. But look, a lot of what you said is absolutely correct. And I do agree that there is a fine line. I mean, we don't want to be China, right? We certainly don't want that, but we also don't want to be the UK. We don't want to be the United States of America dealing with justice, because the way that it was for the last 4 years, at least, was everybody got off. I mean, no bail. I mean, it was like you said, it was controlled anarchy, basically. Now that's starting to change a little bit here in the United States of America. Hopefully it changes for you guys, and you can get something like a castle law in which you're allowed to defend yourself in your own home in a situation like that. But look, I think a lot of it has to do with immigration. Immigration is the key. And more people coming into your country that refuse to assimilate. Immigration without assimilation is an invasion. That's just a fact of life. And these people that are bombarding your country and other countries and coming into the countries illegally and being invited in by your own government, well, that's treason against your government, because your government is committing treason against its own people. Now, how do you rectify that? I don't know. I'm not sure what the Australian Constitution has in order to remedy that. I know that in our case in the United States of America, we have a right to redress our government and or change our government if and when it doesn't adhere to the principles of the U.S. Constitution and to serve the rights of we the people. But again, that's a U.S. Constitution is a lot more powerful, a lot more different than most other constitutions out there. So I would hope that it would change. I think what you said earlier off the record before we got on the air, it could be the catalyst to that change. If something happens to a very important politician, an MP, perhaps a judge, or even a chief of police, if something happens to them that's horrific, well, then maybe at that point they'll act and you'll have a castle law to be able to defend yourself in your own domicile, in your own home. Because let's face it, that's your house, that's your stuff. Where did police come from throughout history? All these people had all these different things, right? They had cattle, they had goats, they had chickens, and then someone would come in and go, oh, I'm just going to steal your goats and your chickens or whatever, right? Many, many, many years ago. Well, they needed a sheriff. They needed someone to say, wait, that's that person's. If you want that, then you have to either ask for it or buy it from them or barter with them. And that's where civilization kind of started. So civilization is based on policing, because you cannot have a society without some type of policing. Granted, there are levels to that. And more importantly, there's that fine line to balance. We don't want an over powerful government that has a heavy hand on everything and is watching and surveilling and, like China does. No, we don't want that. But we also don't want complete anarchy where the police are defunded. There's no cash bail for criminals, and they are just, out there looting and committing crimes. So where is that fine line? Where is that balance? I think it rests within each individual, each community, each town, each state for that matter. And that's the difference. And again, I keep coming back to the fact that that's what makes the United States so much different than any other place in the entire world. We have a robust Second Amendment. And what we say in the United States of America is that governments have a choice of either force or reason to deal with their constituents. If the people are armed, then that forces those governments to use reason rather than force. However, if the people, those constituents, do not have arms, then the government literally has no reason to use anything but force. And that's truly the difference. That's why the Second Amendment in the United States is the most important amendment. Technically, it should be the First Amendment because it protects all the rest. And so that's really all I can add to that.
Well, here in Australia, 2/3, according to former Senator Rennick, 2/3 of the population are now in favour of a reduction in immigration. So that's more than obviously half, and it certainly means that Labor voters are in that group now. So that's a significant amount. And he's proposed and he's provided, as usual, in his posts on X and Facebook, significant detail in the student visas, those overstaying and refusing to return, and others, etc. And then what happens is the process by which they are educated to make administrative appeals tribunal hearings, which grants them a further 3 or 4 years years in the country before they get to the hearing that they can go on, get a job and effectively move towards permanent residency. So in other words, if they dig their heels in, they don't have to go, and the system provides for it. So the system always appeases those in that regard. And this is the idea of the gentle West that behaves in such a way much like the criminals get away with it. But of course, it's not representing the masses. So 66% are now against the expansion, or at least they want the reduction of immigration. That's a big deal. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again, and there are many third parties in Australian politics, and I spoke recently to Phil Dan, whose interview will be going on air, I think, in a couple of weeks' time. I'm going to put it out on the 51st state, and he talks about what they did in the US, in Florida in particular, in terms of winning elections, etc. But here we've had a big development on Sunday, is that our National Party, which is one half of the coalition that forms the opposition in our country, has now decided to go anti-net zero. And of course that aligns them now with One Nation and the rest of the third parties. And I don't put One Nation ahead of on any other pedestal, except that they have more of percentage support than the other parties, and that's why they get that particular situation. But they're not doing a hell of a lot in terms of winning seats and making people feel welcome. And that's why there are 10 other, at least, third parties. Now, it makes sense now that the two things that are going to be able to create a line in the sand of definition, which will force the Liberal Party to move, and that is going against net zero and calling for a reduction in immigration. Some people talk about remigration, ending migration, halting migration, and that's idealistic. And it's extreme, and there will be people that will sit on the bandwagon and go, well, I'm not going to support the National Party because they don't agree exactly what I want to do. Well, that's not politics. At the end of the day, you saw President Trump come out and support Andrew Cuomo. Now, they would be at the absolute opposite ends of the spectrum. But it was because you were choosing from the lesser evil. And unfortunately, in politics, sometimes, or most of the time, you have to choose the lesser evil, unless you can get to a situation that you do get someone that's a once-in-a-lifetime candidate that you can believe in. And many people thought Obama. I did. I thought Obama was going to be something special, and then it didn't take long before I realised he was a con man, dressed up and behaving in such a way, and it looks like he's connected to CIA. Now, interestingly, you mentioned Nick Fuentes earlier, and I read an article by Charles Johnson on Substack that I'm not really a big fan of, but he pointed out that he thought that there were connections between Mamdani, and he called it a sideways. I think he called it a sideways CIA connection, given that his father was an academic, a certain type of Muslim. His mother was a Hindu and a filmmaker, which he says is always a connection to intelligence agencies. And Mamdani himself identifies as a Shia Muslim, which is different to both parents, which is interesting in itself. And being a Shia versus, what's the other? Sunni, have two different beliefs in the ascendancy from Muhammad. And so this is a stark difference. This is why they fight and etc. over the years. So then he pointed to Fuentes and identified that Mamdani went to a certain school, Fuentes went to a certain school, of which both generally is where CIA people are recruited from. And they said the only thing about Fuentes is that maybe he was tried or an attempt to create some sort of bring him into the agency, etc. And he just touches on it. And those people want to check out Charles Johnson on Substack might want to read that. But then it's interesting that you mentioned that he was on Tucker Carlson, of course, because Tucker Carlson has been connected to CIA in the past. And interestingly, those that didn't like Tucker, yes, and those that didn't like Tucker a year ago pointed that out. But today, when Tucker is interviewing Fuentes, they go quiet on it. It's like the whole thing with Prince Andrew. When Trump was in the UK, they were putting pictures up of Trump and Epstein, massive posters everywhere, but no one said a word about Andrew and Epstein. Weird. And no one said a word about Charles and Jimmy Savile. But now all of a sudden it's back to Trump and Epstein, but we've just seen the whole Andrew story. So this is one of the great big battles about what we do. We try and present facts, we try and present proper opinion, but we don't change minds of anyone. Or on the contrary, people they put their hands up and they deny. I even asked the same question when I was at the summit in July.
Yes, you talked to Tucker Carlson. Briefly.
Well, I talked to Tucker in June of 24.
Is that when it was? Okay. Yeah, I remember that.
And then this year. And why?
You asked him that question when he was there.
Well, I asked him about conspiracy theory, and he defined it beautifully. But I also asked about the idea of comparing AI. This is to Steve. Why am I forgetting his name right now? But it'll come to me. When I asked him, I said, as a billionaire businessman, what's the difference between AI in business or in an argument? And he said, you argue with a person today, and you give them facts that they don't like. The shutters come down. They just ignore you. But with AI, at least you can present the facts and say, listen, this is not right. These are the facts. And AI goes away and comes back and goes, you're right. And that I find fascinating. And even what was the Trump lawyer that I interviewed, John Eastman? He said the same thing when he asked for case law on natural birthright citizenship and was given a case. It was completely wrong. And he went and looked at it, went back to AI, to Grok, and said, you're wrong. These are the reasons. And Grok goes, you're right. I'll change it. You can have an easier argument with AI than you can with people on the political divide now. So it's not, unfortunately, it's nothing. It just shows to you that we will believe anything that suits our narratives, and we probably might be guilty of it. But unfortunately, the conspiracy theorists are batting 1,000 against the establishment that keeps getting caught out for their fibs, Josh.
Well, I always say the truth has no agenda, and neither do I. The truth is what the truth is, okay? And it can't be manipulated. It can't be changed. And that's why it's so powerful. That's why I challenge anyone on the left all the time to, debate me on any subject. Doesn't matter what it is. You can pick. Doesn't matter. I know it all. And so therefore, I know the truth. So you can't argue with someone that knows the truth. You can lie about it. You can say that I'm not right, but then you're right. Someone's going to find out that indeed the person that has the truth on their side wins the argument. It doesn't matter what the other person says. Getting back to what you were talking about, as far as the 2/3 of the majority of people in Australia actually support that you want either net zero or no immigration or whatever. Do you have ballot initiatives like we do in the United States of America? So in other words, let's say you want to say, I want the castle rule for all of Australia, and you become the face of that movement, right? Castle Now, let's call it, whatever. And you go around to all different areas of Australia, and you get them to sign a petition saying, would you be interested in being able to defend yourself in your own home? Well, yeah, of course I would. Okay, sign this. And you get enough signatures on whatever it is, and then you present it to the voters as a ballot initiative, which then overrides government officials that maybe aren't in favor of that initiative. I talk a lot about that in Preserving Liberty here. I explain how to get around left-leaning or globalist-leaning governors and things like that, and secretaries of state and attorney generals and all that. And it's we, the people here in the United States, we have all the power. We just don't know how to use it. So what I do is try to teach people that. I don't know if you have the same type of a mechanism in Australia that allows you to do something like that. But if you do, that's how you can bypass these globalist MPs in Australia, these politicians that want open borders. You can bring it directly to the people of Australia. And if you can get it to pass, then it becomes law. At least that's how it is here in the United States of America. Do you have something like that?
No, look, we don't have that type of system, but they used the petition system, right? So on castle law in Queensland, because the youth crime's so bad, they collected 114,000 signatures on a petition in a state with, a few million people. It was the highest ever petition by a long shot, by a long way, and it was rejected. So that's...
Who rejected it? The voters?
No, the coalition government, the LNP, it's not a coalition.
Okay, so in other words, in your system of government, the people's voice doesn't count as much as the people that have been elected. So Correct. You can't override your government, bureaucracy, and officials like we can in the United States. So like, for instance, let's just say, I'll just throw it out there. Let's say that we want... a voter ID law in a state. Let's say in, Ohio. Ohio says we want mandatory voter ID and we want to raise the voting age to 21 instead of 18, right? Let's just say that they did that. And let's say every politician in Ohio said, I don't want that. Doesn't matter if there's enough people in the state of Ohio that voted for that as a ballot initiative, once it qualified for the amount of signatures, that overrides Ohio or whatever state it might be's decision of their government. You follow what I'm saying? So in other words, the people rule. We have that here in America, which is, again, another different way of doing things, and why we have a robust United States Constitution where other countries don't. But what you're saying is that you could get 1 million signatures when you only needed 100,000, but you still have a roadblock of elected officials that can say, nah, sorry, we don't want it. I don't know.
Exactly right.
That's
Well,
tough.
let me explain another example for you, Josh. In 2023, they held a referendum on the voice to Parliament, and it was voted 61 to 39 no across the country. In Victoria, they voted 55 to 45% no. So there was roughly about 9%, give or take, difference there, which represents, in terms of voters, about a third of a million people difference. Well, a week ago, the Victorian government voted to have their own voice to Parliament in Victoria. They passed that law without any consultation or debate within the general public again. So what you're seeing now is that once you use the democratic system, it then becomes a dictatorship, and they don't listen to the people there. They just keep pushing these agendas and agendas and agendas, and you just realise, well, who are you serving?
See, that's why I could never live in any other country but the United States of America, because I would be arrested, jailed, dead. I mean, I would never, ever obey a tyrannical government under any circumstances. So glad I live right here in the good old US of A.
Absolutely. Well, apologies there to Steve Kirsch. That's his name. I forgot his surname.
Kirsch, yeah.
Steve Kirsch, who I interviewed a couple of times at the summit there in July on the Gold Coast, and that's who was explaining what was going on. Now, just before we go, Hakeem Jeffries has decided that it's time now for the legislative leaders to end the Republican shutdown of the federal government, to precisely address it. You are always going to be gaslit by the Democrats. Meanwhile, Ron Johnson says that the president is 100%. We know Democrats will nuke the filibuster as soon as they're able to solidify their grip on power. We should act first in order to pass laws that benefit the American people. So the idea there is to change the filibuster, which means instead of having to have 60 votes to get to pass the budget bills, to pay the bills, you only need a majority in the Senate to do so. Now, what's interesting here in Australia, Josh, is that in any government, the Westminster system, there is an agreement with the opposition to pass supply bills, which is the money bills. It is a thing that you do. It is a convention, and the only time that was ever breached in this country, I think it's happened maybe a second time, but Malcolm Fraser, the then Liberal Party opposition leader in the era of Gough Whitlam, he decided to block supply, and in turn then created a constitutional crisis that the Labor government was going to run out of money, which forced the hand of our Governor General, Sir John Kerr, to then sack the Whitlam government and install Malcolm Fraser as the Prime Minister of the country, and they then went to election, and Fraser won in a landslide at that point. But that gives you an idea here. So over there, you can just shut the government down and that's it. But over here, if you do that and break that convention, the agreement that you will support supply, that's the case. Now, even in the case of a minority government, when we had one in 2010 here in Australia, there was an agreement amongst the three independents that formed part of the minority government that they would support supply bills, and that was part of the arrangement that you had to make, literally, a gentleman's agreement that you would do so, and that was the case there. But so you can't hold the government hostage at that point. It's just very interesting, the comparisons between the two countries there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely there is. Look, a lot of people in America are looking at these results and they're saying, oh, this is a repudiation of President Trump. It's a repudiation against the shutdown. It's a repudiation against these ICE raids. It's not. What it is three bright blue states and one bright blue city electing radical extreme leftists, and those are who their voters are. This would never fly in Ohio. This wouldn't fly in Florida. It wouldn't fly in Arizona. It wouldn't fly in Georgia. It wouldn't fly in North Carolina. It wouldn't fly in Iowa. It wouldn't fly anywhere else other than these blue cities. So for the media to run around saying that this was a repudiation against President Trump and his policies, it's just not true. This is a microcosm, not a macrocosm. The reality is that their map, and I said this on my show last night, their map is shrinking. Our map is expanding. Okay. Ohio used to be the bellwether, right? However Ohio went, that's how the presidency went. Well, guess what? President Trump won Ohio by, I think, 10 points this last time, 8 points the last time before that. It's not a bellwether. It's not a swing state anymore. Iowa, Barack Obama won Iowa, I believe, twice in 2008 and 2012. In 2016, President Trump won it. In 2020, he won it. In 2024, he won it. And he won it by 14 points just this last time. Iowa used to be a swing state. No more. Florida, for goodness sakes. It was always whatever Florida does is how it's going to go, right? Florida could go either way. No, Florida is a completely red state now. So again, they're losing their map. We're gaining on the map. So this was not a repudiation. This was 3 blue states, New Jersey, New York, and Virginia, that literally are blue, bright blue states. So it was almost expected. Republicans need to understand that we've got to make sure that we are getting the vote out. But more importantly, and I agree with President Trump because I agree with Senator Ron Johnson, this Democrat Party, 2025, 2026, and in the future, they are so extreme and they want power so bad and they want to fundamentally transform this country of the United States of America to look more like Europe or even worse, okay? And the filibuster keeps that from happening. So while we're in power for the next 3.5 years, let's pass everything. Let's get voter ID. Let's redo our census, not counting illegal aliens. Let's get 40 million people, 40 billion, well, 40, I would say, billion dollars worth, but 40 million people off of these SNAP benefits that are illegal aliens. Let's pass it all. Let's just do it all, and they won't have any more power. And if the Supreme Court does the right thing and zaps Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, you're talking 19 to 20 seats right then and there. Redo the U.S. Senate census, you've got another 20 seats. That's a 40-seat advantage. If Republicans had any balls, if they had any brains at all, they would realize Democrats aren't playing. If, God forbid, they ever get back in power, look out. The revenge and retribution that they will inflict on the United States and on the American people will be so severe, it'll completely change this country. And it'll lead to, sadly, a violent conflict with the government at some point in the future. We don't want that. So in order to avoid that, let's get rid of those elements that want that, number one. And number two, let's change all these laws. Never mind just getting the government open. Let's make sure that our elections are 100% safe. Let's redistrict the heck out of all these states. Look, if they want to do a redistricting battle, a tit for tat, they're going to lose, because in reality, there's no such thing as a blue state. Okay, there's blue cities that eventually have enough people that turn that state blue. But if you look at a map of the United States, it is pretty much all red with some speckles of blue around the coasts and some other different areas. So the reality is, let's redistrict. Let's make this country all red, for that matter, and let's get rid of these criminal elements and these corrupt people in our government and in Washington. That's what I would say.
Well said. Well, it's been an interesting discussion, comparing notes across the great pond of the Pacific Ocean as we look at this, historic moment in New York that the great capitalist city has now got. The communist in chief there, Mamdani, who's already asking for money. How about that? Well, we'll see you all on the next show. Check out Josh at JBU Show on Substack. Just look up jbushow.substack.com, channel51.com.au, and I've got a series of interviews, some in the can already and some yet to be recorded, because I'll be away for a couple of weeks from mid-November to the end of the month. I've got Susan Kakinda from Prometheus Action tomorrow. I'm really excited about speaking to Susan. I interviewed Tony Lyons recently. That'll be on there as well, which was terrific, who is the publisher of Josh's book. And of course, correct. RFK and Melania Trump. And
tell him I said hello.
Many
by the
others.
way.
Absolutely.
Tony's a good guy. Ask him if he had a chance to read my book. I sent it to him so long ago, and he promised he'd read it. If you can remember to ask him that, I would greatly appreciate it, because if he read the book, and I don't know if he did, but if he did, he would then say, okay, this is a book that everybody needs to read. He'd give it to the Trump administration. And the next thing you know, Preserving Liberty would be a bestseller almost instantly and overnight. So if you could ask him that, I would greatly appreciate that. And to anyone out there that was offended by anything I said, please send hate mail to the Josh Bernstein Show at gmail.com. I prefer reading it when I'm on the toilet.
Well said. On that note, we will see you all next time. Thanks for watching.
God bless.